1 week season.
OWS fam, welcome in. We are back in at the DFS lab. So glad you're with us. As always, the show is presented by 1 week season. The purpose of the show, build a lineup on DraftKings and really use that as a vehicle to talk through the upcoming slate. We are headed downhill now. Officially, you're watching the show on Thursday, even though we're recording it Wednesday night, late at night. It's about 10:30 Eastern right now, but we are headed towards week 3, the main slate. I'm your host, Cheeseman. I'm with you here on the DFS Lab 4 days a week. As always, if you find value in this content, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified when we come out with a new video. We would really appreciate that. And with that, time to bring up StatATL. Stat, how you doing, man? Any final thoughts or just thoughts that are still left over from week 2? And by the way, I must say, great job yesterday on Tuesday, since this video is coming out on Thursday. Great job on your lineup review video. You do a good job just like quickly diagnosing what's going on in a lineup. You go through like quite a few lineups on that show. I'm impressed.
Yeah, thanks, Cheese. Yeah, generally, I think the last 2 weeks we got 50 in week 1, and I think 41 or 42 submissions on Sunday. So yeah, I try to just kind of quickly look through rosters and typically try to review at least a dozen. I think we've done about 15, and just kind of talk through, really it's just more about the construction. And it's always so interesting because I'll give people some feedback of, hey, I think on this type of build, like I would have considered playing X instead of Y. And then, in some situations, like player X scored like 3 points and player Y, who he did play, scored like 15. They'll be like, wait, you wanted me to score 13 less points on this roster? And I feel like that people just tend to be like really results oriented. And just, And so generally for me, like the point of the show is to try to get people to build better rosters and just to say, hey, when things break your way, like, is your roster, assembled in a way that would lead you to have a path to first place? And we try to talk through that, in the lens of, hey, is this like a small field contest? Is this a contest with 800 people in it? Or is this a Millie Maker contest that's got 200,000 people in it?
Yeah, you broke that down well.
Everything in between. For me, my specialty has always kind of been more of those single entry 3 max kind of things, anything ranging from, 600, 1,000 entrants all the way up to like 15, 20,000. All of my real wins have come in those 5 to 10,000 entry contests. And so just trying to say, hey, like, this is what I think that you need to be doing in order to give yourself a path to first place. And if you're playing a Millie Maker roster, it's like, well, this could win. You got 9 dart throws, but like just so many things have to break your way. So yeah, I mean, that's, I feel like we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback from subscribers. This is something we brought back from last year. And the new wrinkle this year is, along with myself, we always review my highest dollar single entry, which is usually the $50. But this year we've started doing another subscriber as well, another contributor. So week 1, Mike Johnson sent in a roster. We looked at, his $100 SPY or $75 3 max. And then last week, and by last week, I mean Monday, we looked at high lows, like sent in like a Millie Maker, a 555 Millie Maker roster. And so, little spoiler alert to those who are tuning into this. Not sure if it's going to be week 3 or week 4, but in the next 2 weeks, we're going to review a roster from JM, and he may make a surprise appearance onto the show and help do a little roster breakdown as well. So we'll kind of see who gives what feedback. We may have differing opinions on things, so that'll be interesting.
That's a perfect teaser. And if you want to check out StatATL's lineup review video, it'll be right up in that top right-hand corner of the screen, right above your head there, Stat. And I think the thing that I like that is unique about the show that me and you do here on the DFS Lab is when you build lineups on this show, you intend to put them into contests. And so I'm just going to pull up the lineup that we built on the show last week. And it did, let's see if I got it here. Yeah, here's the one we built on the show last week. This one did pretty well, didn't it?
Yeah. So last week I entered this roster in the $27 single entry. And I want to say it finished like in the top 50. Like it scored like 165, 170 points. It did quite well, which is really interesting because I went and watched back our show, and I just couldn't help but notice like all the comments in maybe not all, but there were a bunch of comments on the video that was just like, oh, this feels like 100-point roster. This roster has no chance. And I was just like biting my tongue. I'm like, actually, it finished like top 3 or 4% in like every single entry. So, and then funny enough, like the one that I entered my $50 single entry that you and I talked about for week 1 wasn't the one we built on stream because Hilo had built the same. So that one we reviewed it on the it was a similar build, but different stack. We reviewed it on the Monday show for week 1. I think it finished like 37th or 38th for $500. So the single entry ones we're building on these shows, we're putting into play, and 2 for 2, they've both been top 5% lineups.
Yeah, man. Well, let's jump in and talk a little bit about week 3. Let's kind of go back and forth here for a second. I'm going to give you a game environment that I like. I not necessarily. Well, I'll just jump right in. I do like this Dallas-Baltimore game. The thing that is tough is that the players from that game are expensive. I was on Dak last week and just felt like Dak plus CeeDee Lamb at home against the Saints. They looked pretty good against Cleveland in week 1, and last year that was a recipe for success for Dallas, and they really got like stunned. I think that was maybe one of the biggest upsets of the NFL season so far, was the way that the Saints completely just manhandled the Cowboys in week 2. And so in this game, Baltimore, they've struggled a little bit defensively, and I just feel like Dallas has something to prove here. The thing that is tough is that, again, Dak and CD are expensive. Even last week when I was building lineups, as I was putting them together, I was thinking to myself, these Dak and CD lineups, I just do not like how these look. As I'm looking at these lineups, these feel ugly, and sometimes you do have to play ugly lineups, and sometimes those lineups win, but that's the hard thing. But the other thing about this game is just that, as we all know, like for games to take off, you need explosive players, and you certainly have them in this game. So that's a game environment that I like. I'll definitely be playing around with builds and seeing this week if I can come up with something that looks like a lineup that has a chance with a Dak and CD stack, and potentially, obviously, with a bring back from Baltimore as well. What about you? What are you seeing so far here in week 3? Who do you like?
I mean, I really liked Dallas last week as well. On the roster review show, I try to be really transparent. I show all my exposures. And Dallas was one of my highest exposures. I think I was 20 or 25% Dak Prescott last week, 20 to 25% CeeDee Lamb last week. So we were aligned. And this week, I think it presents an opportunity to be a high-scoring game as well. I think Vegas totals probably 48, 49 points. One of the highest on the slate. So it's one I like. It's not my favorite. I think my 2 kind of favorite game environments, maybe there's 3. I would say Saints and Eagles is probably up there as my top 2 or 3. I do really like the Texans and the Vikings.
Okay.
And then probably my favorite game environment is the Lions at the Cardinals. And so that may be where we start a lineup this week, is kind of go in that direction.
Let's jump in, actually. And I love that game environment as well. All those that you mentioned, I haven't even picked a contest yet, though. So let me jump into the lobby here. And I know you like to build for single entries. So shall we just target like a single entry contest here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I will play, the $3, the $5, the $12, the 27, the 50, and I'll generally play the main contest as well as the secondary ones that they sometimes put out later in the week. Sometimes they show up right away. But yeah, I mean, this is a good one, 3,000 person contest. Nice flat payout structure. Looks like 10% to first, and then 1% of the total prize pool to 10th. That's a really flat payout structure. In the contest selection articles that I write every week, like this is one that I'll highlight. Like this is a really well structured contest. This is one that I'll play every week.
Totally. Okay, so who do you want to start out with here? Do you want to start with the primary game stack for this lineup? Do you want to look at some one-offs first? What direction you want to start?
Yeah, so for me, I always try to decide where I want to focus the attention, and for me, that's always the stack. I always stack. I don't think I ever play a quarterback naked without any pass catcher. Even a mobile guy, Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson, like if they're putting up a score that you have to have, so high a percentage of the time, like 95% of the time, they're bringing along a guy with him. And when you're in a field of, I think this one had like 3,500 people in the contest. When you're playing in a field with thousands of entries or 10,000 or even more, like if Anthony Richardson or Justin Fields or, on this particular case, since I know we're going to talk about Detroit and Arizona, like if Kyler Murray puts up a score that you had to have, someone on that field is going to get the stack right, especially because, Arizona is a reasonably concentrated offense. It's not like Detroit where there's a lot more viable options. Arizona's more condensed. So if it's Kyler Murray that is the had to have it guy, it's more than likely it's going to be with either, Harrison or McBride or even James Conner. Like the number of guys that it's likeliest to be are much more condensed. Where if we're talking Detroit, like it could easily be Gibbs, it could be Amon-Ra St. Brown, it could be Jameson Williams, it could be Laporta, it could, we've seen Montgomery have good, really strong games. You know what I mean? Like there's just so many more options, and those guys are all expensive. Whereas with Arizona, like the likeliest candidates, they're really just two. It's really, or three if you want to include James Conner. So to me, I'm always going to start with a stack. Not always a bring back, but I think on this particular case, we will. So let's go ahead and start with Kyler Murray here. Again, this is a really exciting game for me. And it's interesting, I think on the very first episode, we talked about how your best ball thoughts needed to evolve into the daily game. And for me, like I wasn't super high on Arizona in best ball outside of James Conner. James Conner is my highest exposure player just because he was in the first couple of months, like he was going in the 80s and the 90s and the hundreds. And it was like, okay, this is a good workhorse back. People are undervaluing him. But like Marvin Harrison Jr. was going at the end of the first round. I was like, that is just such a steep price to pay. And McBride was generally one of the first or second tight ends off the board, going in like the third or fourth round most drafts. As it progressed on, he started to go in the fifth, but it's just like, the cost was just so high. So they were not a team I was super high on in best ball and overall. But, I think last week we built a Cardinal stack. So they're a team that I've really come around on. And the pricing, I think, is strong. So, yeah, let's go Kyler Murray. And then, his main options are either Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride for me. And so I know we saw Marvin Harrison have a pretty strong game last week. He went 4 for 130 and 2 touchdowns. So we've seen kind of what his potential ceiling could be. However, he's 7,400 and he has 5 career receptions in the NFL. Like I have a hard time paying that price. Like if we kind of look at guys like AJ Brown, Cooper Kupp, like if we eliminate those guys who we know aren't going to play, like Marvin Harrison's like the 4th or 5th or something like that wide receiver in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep, 5th.
Like, it's just like I don't know that I can justify that. And it's not like he's going to come in at low ownership. You know, people are going to see we put up whatever 20 some odd points last week.
30.
There will be
he
30.
hit the 30
there will
burger.
be people. Yeah, there will be people chasing that. So if he was going to come in at lower ownership, I feel like I could maybe get behind that. But so let's go Trey McBride here. That helps us kind of both knock off the onesie positions between quarterback and tight end. I mean, technically you could play 2 tight ends, but we aren't going to do that. And I think that this is just such a viable way of getting exposure to this game. You know, it's a 51 or 52 point title. I think it's the highest Vegas total on the slate. And it's just such a great game environment. It's going to be indoors. You know, no weather concerns. Not that you would have real weather concerns in Arizona anyway. But yeah, I mean, I love this. And then generally, like for me, I like bringbacks. And I think that there's just such a natural bringback on this game to go with Jameson Williams. Yeah, man. I think that just makes too much sense not to go that way for us on this particular build. So that's like kind of where I want to start.
Doesn't feel like his price has moved up that much at all so far. So one thing I did want to ask you real quick, with Kyler having the rushing upside and the potential to take a touchdown in on his own, can you double stack him if you wanted to, or would you say it's optimal with him in particular to do more of a skinny stack?
Yeah, so I think that you could do a double stack with a mobile quarterback. Personally, I don't do it very often because, especially on a guy like Kyler Murray, who's close to $7,000 in salary, you are playing him in hopes of a ceiling performance. And so a ceiling performance for him is, scoring into the 30s. And so where he's most likely to do that is to have, some points on the ground through his legs, as well as a rushing touchdown. So when he gets a rushing touchdown, or even, if you're really lucky, he gets 2 rushing touchdowns, that's just taking away from, the points that your other players can get. So to me, I generally will play a pocket passer with a double stack, because for him to reach his ceiling, he's probably throwing 4 touchdowns or more. And so that's where I'm willing to go more with 2 different wide receivers, where if it's more of a mobile quarterback and I'm banking on his legs, I generally only like to bring 1 pass catcher along.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay, so right now we got that skinny stack and then Jameson Williams for Detroit. So this is kind of the building blocks of our lineup. Do you want to look at the running back position next? Where do you want to go?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the biggest decisions this week will be around San Francisco. And again, it's Wednesday, so we don't have any ownership projections. But just as we kind of talked about last week, early in the week, we identified kind of what we thought would be the 3 kind of big focal points. And those ended up kind of being the situations with the most ownership. I don't know that it'll be the most ownership, but I feel like one of the biggest decisions that you have to make this week is, what are you going to do with San Francisco? So now they are down Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, also likely to miss this game as well. So you've got a team that is normally a pretty consolidated offense, now even more consolidated, to really 3 key pieces of guys that I would expect Jordan Mason to again see at least 20 opportunities. And I think it's very likely that at least one of either Kittle or Brandon Ayuk, one of them I think is very likely to see at least 10 targets. So I think that to me, I think I'm considering a rule of at least 1 49er in every lineup. And by the 1 49er, I'm specifically thinking of those 3 players. I don't know that I will go and take a shot on like a Jawan Jennings. Although he did help me win the underdog best ball contest or playoff best ball contest last season, the whatever that's called, the gauntlet. So I do have a warm spot for him, a soft spot for Jawan Jennings, but I don't think it's going to be this week. So yeah, I mean, I think so. What's on this build? To me, the best, again, and same as it was last week, like when you're playing a single entry contest, I feel like a lot of times people play it too safe, like they build like a cash lineup. However, like you do want some floor. You're not playing in the Millie Maker. You don't have to have the nuts in order to win. A 3,000 person contest, if the optimal score for the week is like 230, like the lineup that wins the $27 single entry will probably have like 205. Like there are plenty of, like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't really even have to be, you can be 10% off and you'll still be fine. So, to me, Jordan Mason again is one of the safest spots on the slate in terms of like just betting on opportunities. Barring injury, he's likely going to get 20 or more opportunities again. And that's just the biggest predictor of fantasy points is opportunity, is touches. So let's pencil him in here as one of the running back spots. And then I think running back, I feel like there's like several different directions that you could go. I feel like there's several really strong options this week. If you're looking to spend a little bit more, Alvin Kamara, again, likely to see 20 plus touches again this week. I think he is he's quite viable, and we just saw like Bijan Robinson and Josh Jacobs go for over 100 total yards, in this same spot. So feels like a good spot for Kamara, against the Eagles. So I do like that as a potential spot to consider. Yeah. With Skylar Thompson likely to start for Miami, kind of a major downgrade to both Tyreek and Waddle. Like, we saw what they did last week with Devon Achane, with Mostert out. Like, so I think Achane is like 7K. He's a guy that I think very much in line to see 20 to 25 touches again, barring injury, if Mostert is out. So that's another spot that you consider. For me, there are two or three guys that I like a little bit cheaper than that, and who I think again are in line for probably the same type of volume at a lower price point. So on this lineup, let's go with Pollard. Again, playing Green Bay at home. I feel like this is a really good spot for him, especially Tajay Spears dealing with an ankle injury. This is a spot where if Spears is out, Pollard's going to see 20 to 25 touches. And he's $1,500 less than Kamara. So this is just a spot on betting on volume or likely volume and taking a little bit of the price discount. There's a couple other guys in this same price range within a couple $100 either way that I feel like have probably similar roles, but let's go with Pollard here. I like that. Absolutely. Yeah. And Green Bay, their defense against the run has looked leaky so far. And Pollard, again, he had some huge games last year. That was a part of that very explosive Dallas offense. So who knows how high his ceiling is for the, in this Tennessee offense. But I think against Green Bay at home, absolutely like that play. And I digress for a second, but you mentioned the Niners. I will at least note that Hilo on Tuesday, he broke down the Niners pretty extensively as well. So if you want to check that show out, that DFS Lab show out as well, it is linked right there. But stats. So we got this Detroit, Arizona game, Pollard, Mason. So that leaves us about 4,700 left remaining. You got a couple receivers, flex, defense. Where you want to look now? You want to look at defense yet, or we saving that for the last here? No, let's go ahead and go with a placeholder D. I generally like to kind of go right around that 3,000 range. So let's just go with a placeholder of Tampa Bay. At home against Denver. We've seen Denver really struggle on offense. Bo Nick's taking multiple sacks every game, having turnovers. I feel like this is a good spot for Tampa. So let's just pencil in the Bucks here, right around 3,000. And as we've talked about on previous shows, like this gives us the ability to kind of go up or down, kind of depending on where our lineup is as we kind of fill in the last spots. But I do really like where we're at so far with our stacks. I do like Mason. We talked about that in San Francisco. Obviously we got a little bit into Pollard. As you were alluding to, Packers have been pretty susceptible to the running game. I think they allowed 130 yards and 3 touchdowns to Barkley week 1. And then last week, I think they gave up 135 to Jonathan Taylor. So, we've seen what running backs can do against Green Bay. So I do like that. So I think one of the other game environments we talked about was the Eagles and Saints. I feel like that was probably my second favorite game, or in the top 3 for sure. So let's kind of target, let's get the mini correlation there. And I think for me, it was interesting as I was starting to kind of do some of the research for this week. I think I might lock button Devonta Smith this week, which obviously for people who are playing more than 5 or 10 lineups, like not a faint of heart decision. But so in my research, I was doing, I'm a StatATL. I like the stats. So AJ Brown likely to miss. And so I'm kind of projecting for Devonta Smith to see at least 10 targets. When we looked at last week with AJ Brown out, all the other Eagles wide receivers and tight ends. So if you just combined every other pass catcher outside of Devonta Smith, like they combined for 12 for 86 yards last week. So to me, that just tells me Devonta Smith is going to see targets. He's going to be fed opportunities. Because I just don't see the Saints offense failing. So if the Saints offense is putting up points, the Eagles are going to have to be passing. And so I went back and looked at the 10. So he's had 10 career games where Devonta Smith has seen double-digit targets. So 10 or more games. And actually in our Discord, I put all the stats out, but just very high level. Those 10 games, Devonta Smith averages 8 catches for 94 yards and 0.6 touchdowns. So he scored 6 touchdowns in the 10. So, if you account for the 4 times that he hit the 100-yard bonus, it's an average DK performance of 21.2 points as an average. For people who like to look at it as a median, it's a median performance of 21.7 points. So, at 6,900, if you're telling me the average performance I'm likely to get out of Devonta Smith is 21 DK points, kind of sign me up. That's basically saying on average he's going to get 3x salary. Obviously, he has ceiling for much more than that. He had multiple games where, he put up over he had 4 games where he scored over 100. He had games where he had multiple touchdowns. So, he has 35-point upside easy. 12 is 24 and 8 is 30. I think his best game is 35 in those games. So, he certainly has that upside to give you that 5x type score, even at 6,900. And it feels like he's got a decently strong floor. I think he did have one performance where it only gave you 10 points, but outside of that, you were looking at much stronger scores the other scores. So I feel like that's a spot that I'd really like to go. And then to kind of pair him, obviously we could look at Kamara. We talked about that. Could obviously look at Chris Olave. He's a guy I like a lot this week too. Let's plug in Chris Olave. What does that leave us left for salary?
2,700.
2,700. So even if we borrowed and we went down at D, that's still like giving us a complete punt at wide receiver.
Definitely, yeah, scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and in my first pass, there weren't any like sub $3,500 wide receivers that I was really excited about. And I'm not even sure there's like any like correlation that we could really build into this lineup with one of those kind of punts. So let's, what if we looked at Rashid Shaheed? He's a guy that I've really liked, explosive upside, seeing increased snap rates compared to previous years. What does that leave us in terms of salary?
37. So still slim, but it's still obviously doable.
Still doable. All right. So instead, what if we borrowed some from defense? Like if we went instead of the mid tier, what if we looked at cheaper defense? So for me, when I go through and do my process, and I throw this out into Discord, and I think it makes it onto Twitter as well. Like I generally try to identify 5 or 6 Ds that I like 2 kind of pay up options, 2 in the middle, kind of around 28 to like 33, and then 2 generally 2,600 or less. And so for me, those 2 cheap Ds this week were either the Bears, who I think are 2,600, or the Vikings, who are 2,400. So let's get like real aggressive and let's throw in the Vikings at 2,400. What does that leave us left?
43.
Okay, so let's look at some of those options. I think I've got a guy in mind. To just kind of even continue with the correlation. At 4,200, Jordan Whittington, I think, and this is kind of one of those potentially uncomfortable clicks because this is the first time we're kind of seeing the Rams without both Cooper Kupp and Kyren. Obviously, Kyren was a rookie last year. Puka Nacua. Obviously, Puka Nacua was a rookie last year, so we have seen the Rams without both of them, going back to 2022. But, in the more recent future, we haven't seen the Rams without both of those 2 guys. So this is kind of a bet on opportunity. I do see the Rams going to have to throw the ball. They're likely going to be leaning on Kyren Williams here. But they're still going to throw the ball. It's not like Matt Stafford is going to turn into Malik Willis and throw the ball 14 times. Like Stafford's still going to throw the ball 25, 30 times. So, and those throws got to go somewhere. So I think to me, you're just kind of saying, hey, do I want to take a shot? If I'm going to take a shot on a Ram, is it Demarcus Robinson? Is it Ty Johnson? Is it Jordan Whittington? Is it, is it Colby Parkinson? Like, where do you want to go? I feel like there are viable, somewhat inexpensive options in terms of pass catchers. They're all priced up compared to last week. But let's go with Jordan Whittington here because then that ties in with some correlation with Jordan Mason. And as I always talk about on the roster review, like, do you have to have correlation? No. Will I always do it? Yes. And so I like this. This kind of gives us kind of basically 3 or 4 bets and then like one off of just Pollard.
Yeah, exactly. Highly correlated, like you like it. Love it, Stat. As we kind of get set to close the show out, any final thoughts, before we ship this one?
No, I mean, again, it's always awesome that we get such great turnout to these videos, and I'm hoping it's driving more folks to the site. Come on over and kind of see what it's all about. It's 1 week season is just so different than all the other sites out there. We're not really a picks and plays. It's as JM likes to say, if you have a boat, we'll teach you how to fish. It's just a different mentality way of looking at it. So, I'm hoping it leads more folks over to check out the site. And as always, man, always great to chat with you. And hopefully this time next week we're talking about this lineup as another top 10% finishing lineup.
Dude, I'm hoping that Devonta Smith has a 30-plus burger and you lock him in every lineup, and you're going to be wearing, gold watches and what. I'm kidding. But, I was going to say, though, yeah, head to 1 week season, check it out. I mean, even just all that analysis or the stats that you dropped on Devonta Smith, it's good stuff, man. So, as always, thanks for joining us on the DFS Lab. Stat, thanks for your sharp thoughts as always, and we will catch you next time.